So we are looking at a series, a couple for this week and next week called Reclaiming Joy. And we are looking at the life of Peter. Now, as we kind of look at the story, and maybe you know some of the parts of Peter's story, but there's this moment where the disciples have had these two miraculous moments. The first one that we're going to kind of touch on real quickly that is significant for Peter, it's right after Jesus has fed the 5,000. You know, TK kind of touched on the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. It's right after that moment. Jesus says, hey, disciples, I need some me time. I need you guys to take off. And so if you guys will head across the lake, I'll meet you there. And they're kind of going, whatever, okay. So they jump into the boat and they start going across the lake. They get about 3 miles from shore and the storm starts brewing a little bit. It's significant enough that they're super worried, but they know they need to get across. And all of a sudden, they see this image coming across the water towards them. Now, they had been taught for centuries. And even though they were Jewish, they had even been told that when the waters stir up, it could be spirits coming from the deep. It could be different evil spirits coming to and fro from down below. It could be dead people. It could be all these things, right? And so they see this image coming towards them, and they're kind of freaking out a little bit, and this image speaks in a voice that they've heard every time. It says, it's me. It's Jesus. Don't freak out. And Peter. We talked about him last week. He's the guy, he's the kid, he's the person that just always says the weirdest, strangest things at the weirdest, strangest times. Like the last thing you'd think somebody. He goes, okay, if it's you, Jesus, have me come out, walk on the water with you. Like, which one of us would say that? Like, well, we would probably say something like, hey, just come a little closer. Or, okay, we might still stand off a little bit, but we just kind of wait to make sure it's him, right? No, Peter, he wants to get out. He wants Jesus to prove it. And so what happens is Peter gets out of the boat and he actually walks on water. But we know the story. His eyes get focused on the storm and the waves. And somewhere in his heart, he's questioning whether he can really trust Jesus. And it's enough of a lack of trust and enough of focusing, taking his eyes off Jesus that he begins to sink. And the water surprised him, and he can't come out, and he's starting to drown, and the hand of Jesus pulls him out and puts him in the boat. And it's at this moment that Peter, this is one of the first miraculous moments in Peter's life when he looks at Jesus and says, you are the Son of God. See, what's significant is he's telling Jesus that all the other gods, all the other things we've been told about, even the water, even the storms, they obey you. You are the Son of God. Fast forward a few more weeks, maybe a few more months. And the disciples, Jesus decides to take the disciples to where Jewish people should never even step foot. He takes them to Caesarea Philippi. He takes them to this place where they have decided in this city to build a temple right at the base of a huge giant rock that has a crack running through it. And at the base of the hillside, the mountain, there's an opening. And they believed, they had been told for centuries and centuries, and now the Romans believe that this is where gods and spirits come from the underworld. And over years of trying to practice worshiping a god or gods, they've decided that this is the best place for the god of Pan. Pan was a half man, half goat god. And so they are worshiping this not for real God in all kinds of horrific ways. In fact, the common maybe nickname for Caesarea Philippi was the gates of hell, because of all the perversion and all the bestiality, all the stuff that was going on right in front of everybody to worship this dead God. And here's Jesus with the disciples, and they're looking. And he tells them, do you see what's happening there? And he asks them, he goes, look at these people. Who do they think I am? And of course, they kind of give some different names and different people, and they're kind of thinking about their own friends and their own family and the other people that they know, and they're kind of saying some things about he might be this person or that person from their history. And then he looks at him and goes, but who do you think I am? And Peter. He says, you're the Son of the living God. Two incredible moments for Peter. Two amazing moments. And in this moment, after he says that, Jesus looks at him and looks at the rest of the disciples. And this is what he says. He says, Peter, disciples, you see these people? These are the kind of people that I'm going to build my church on. And the gates of hell will not be able to prevail against it. Jesus wanted his disciples to know that they don't need to be afraid of evil. They don't need to be afraid of the storms. They don't need to be afraid of the things around them. That, in fact, he was telling them, we're going to do something that's going to change those people's lives like they could never, ever imagine. And you guys are going to help me do it. Two amazing moments for Peter. And really, when we think about those things, it could be easy for us to connect with some of it. These aren't just history lessons. These aren't just stories about Peter. They're really stories about us and can connect with us today. Maybe you're one of those people who've put your trust in Jesus just like Peter had. And there's this moment in your life where you're like, oh, Jesus, is it really you? Are you really a part of this? And you step out in faith, and all of a sudden you get caught up in whatever is happening. You get caught up in the storm of your life. You've made decisions that you didn't think you would pay the consequences for, and all of a sudden you find yourself sinking, crying out to Jesus. And the beauty of the story is Jesus is always right there to pick you up and to take care of you. Or maybe you find yourself at a moral crossroads. And there's things in your life that morally you know you've compromised in. Things that maybe it's the people around you and they've compromised and it's affecting you. And you're looking and you're going, man, do I really believe this Jesus thing? Maybe you can relate to both of those stories, to both of those moments. See, both moments aren't just history. They are life lessons. They are moments for us to attach ourselves to the story of not just Peter, not just to the disciples, but the story of Jesus, the story of the gospel. You see, in the first story, we can be like Peter, and we can find ourselves in these moments, and we can find ourselves struggling. And maybe what we need is like a church, a boat. That we get into the boat with other Christians and we get through the storms of life, but we find ourselves thrown overboard. And we're just hoping somebody will come help, come alongside. See, when we take our eyes off of Jesus and we start to focus or complain or gripe or respond in some way outside of trusting Jesus, we will find ourselves sinking. My daughter is attending a church in a small community in Colorado, and she doesn't know a whole lot that's going on, but she attended church the other day, and she kind of got wind that there was some conflict going on within the church, and a couple of the elders had gone to the pastor and decided that they didn't like the way he was doing things, so they had asked him to resign. And the pastor was like, I don't think that's what we need to do. And so some conversation with the rest of the elders came down to he wasn't going to resign, but these two elders and their families and their friends all decided to leave the church. And all of a sudden, you've got a church that they were all supposed to be in a boat together, and now they're divided. You see, we might find ourselves in situations or in moments where life just comes up and we find ourselves either inside the boat or outside the boat, and we're trying to figure out where Jesus is at. We can connect with the idea of Caesarea Philippi because we see evil and immorality all around us. We see people searching for joy in all of the wrong places. Sometimes those people are us, and sometimes they're family or friends. But here's the thing, we can't hide from the evil. The world is doing everything it can to minimize, to belittle, to reduce the effects of Christianity in the world around us. There's a constant push to minimize the church, to minimize the voice of Christians. Just think about what this month is supposed to be, right? Pride Month, right? Pride Month is a very direct attack, not just on Christianity, not just the family, but also fathers. It's intentional. It's to tear down the whole idea of who Jesus is and what he's called us to do. And when we see the colors of a rainbow, how easy is it for us to forget what God designed the rainbow to be? As a reminder of a covenant that he made with us. So maybe this month, as we see it, all the evil all around us, instead of our minds being attracted to the evil, maybe what we need to do is remember the covenant that God made with us, that he will love us. And that he loves the very people that are celebrating the evil right in front of us. You see, we can connect with the story of Peter. And if you have your Bible, I want you to turn to 1 Peter chapter 1. We've been looking at a few verses in 1 Peter, just a few. And last week we kind of hit the first few verses, verses 3, 4, 5, and into 6. But I want to take you back to verse 6, and we're going to look at verses 6 and 7 this morning, because I want us to see what Peter is doing. This is Peter's life. Caesarea Philippi, the sinking in the water, the feeding of the 5,000. These are all moments that have all culminated, and now it's towards the end of Peter's life. And what he has found is joy in spite of what he's experienced. In fact, Peter is not going through a good time even at this moment, and yet he is still finding joy. How does he reclaim joy in these moments? Look at what he says in verse 6. You rejoice in this, even though now, for a short time, if necessary, you suffer grief in various trials, so that the proven character of your faith, more valuable than gold, which, though perishable, is refined by fire, and it may result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus. You see, what Peter is trying to get us to understand is that our identity is found in Christ. It's found in Jesus. As a follower of Christ, your identity is him. But there are things that are going to happen in this life that are going to try to tear that down, to try to make you question whether you really do trust in Jesus, whether you really do believe what Jesus said, whether you really do want to follow Jesus. You're going to find yourself in a boat. You're going to find yourself looking on evil. And you're going to go, where is Jesus in the middle of all this? Where's the joy? Peter says that our rejoicing is actually connected to the struggles we go through. Think about that for a second. How can joy be connected to struggles? I know I've been through some stuff, and not one moment when I was going through that did I ever feel joy. Well, maybe our idea of joy is kind of sideways. Maybe our idea of joy is different than what Peter's talking about. Or maybe our perspective is focused on the negative. He uses this illustration of this gold refined by fire. But if you find this rock, there's a picture of a rock up here, right? I think, yep. If you find a rock about the size of your hand, if you find a rock that looks like this and you try to go sell it, you might make $5-10 if you're lucky, right? But if you take that rock, that iron ore, and you put it under intense heat, melt it down, pound it out, and turn it into some horseshoes, you might make $20. But you take that same rock and you heat it up even more, and you shrink it down even smaller into sewing needles. You can make about $3,500 just for that rock, the size of your hand. You take that same rock, size of your hand, and you whittle it down and you heat it up even more intense, and you trim it down into these small, little, tiny, barely you can see them springs. You can make over $250,000 just off of that rock. What's the difference? It's not the rock. It's the heat, it's the intensity, it's the refining that you do. And that's what Peter is telling us, is that our trials and our struggles, you might be going through some stuff, but those are meant to refine your faith, as long as you have the right perspective. Genuineness of our faith is the result of our testing. Whatever you're going through, it's meant to refine your faith. And so think about this. You might not feel joy We're going to talk about a good definition of the word joy here in a second. But when you begin to realize that the testing of your faith, the testing that you're going through is refining and whittling down this hardness of your heart and breaking you into being able to have more faith and see what Jesus can do with whatever you're going through, it changes everything. And what results in is our character being changed. Our character is expressed through three things he says. Look at what he says in verse 7. So he says, though perishable may result in, here it is, verse 7, may result in praise, glory, and honor. Think about those three words for a second. Praise, that's something that God deserves, right? He deserves our praise. Praise, I kind of termed it this way, begins as an internal reaction that leads to an external response. It's an internal reaction. Praise is an internal. This morning, we were singing some songs, right? And if you just kind of stand there and you just kind of sing the songs and you just do your thing, is that really internal? Have you ever seen somebody who they are just expressing praise? Like they are singing, they're a terrible singer, but they're singing. It might have been the person next to you. It might have been dad. It might have been father. It might have been wife, like, hey, no, that's too much. But when it's coming from the inside, that's praise. That's what God deserves. Singing, reading the word, praying, lifting your hands, dancing. Those are all expressions of praise that we see throughout the Bible. The idea of glory. Glory is what belongs to God. Glory, I put this as a definition, a grasping of the reality of the vertical professed in the horizontal. A reality of understanding who I am and who God is, the vertical, and that being expressed externally to the people around me. A vertical reality of our relationship with God, and it causes this natural profession of who God is. The idea of honor. The idea of honor, it's what we show to properly show the value that we show that we have in who God really is. Honor is unwavering respect, humility, and awe, no matter what we feel. You may not feel really close to God, but you still honor him. You may not feel like somebody loves you, but you still honor them. You still love and care for them. You see, all of these things, and what Peter says is all of these things are focused, are centralized on one aspect, the revelation of who Jesus is. When you realize who Jesus is, you can't help but praise, glory, and honor God. And when you go through trials and you don't feel like things are going well and you're focused on the negativity around you and that's all that seems to capture your mind, if you'll just stop and realize that the testing of your life in that moment is a refining of who you are and your faith, it will turn into praise, honor, and glory because you remember who Jesus is. That's the beauty of what Peter is trying to tell us. It's all centered around this idea of you are the living God. You are the Son of the living God. You are God in the flesh, Jesus. And it will produce what he says in the beginning of verse 6. You will, you can, you should rejoice in this. By the time Peter's writing this, he's been through some stuff. He has dealt with some consequences of his own decisions. He's probably still wrestling with some guilt from denying Jesus. He's probably wrestling with some of the things that he said and the ways that he reacted. I don't know if he ever got to see the guy that he chopped an ear off of, but maybe he's still wrestling with that. He's even been through some stuff that God has allowed. Jesus didn't tell them that they were going to be happy if they followed him. He said life was going to get rough. It's going to get difficult. The world is going to come at you. And you're going to have to take a stand, and you're going to feel rejected, and you're going to feel the pain and the sorrow and the hurt of sin. It's going to be real, but don't be afraid. I'm right there with you. And when you're drowning, I can pull you out. All of it is meant to refine our character. And he says all of it leads to rejoicing. Let me give you a definition of rejoicing. Rejoicing is experiencing joy inwardly and expressing it outwardly consistently. Now, we could have used the word constantly, but the reality of rejoicing is it does take some effort on our part, and you can't do something constantly other than maybe breathe, right? Like, it's really hard to do something constantly, but you can try to do something consistently. And so we need to pursue that joy inwardly, consistently, as often as we can. In many ways, in whatever ways we can find joy. Well, maybe we need a better definition of joy, because to me, what I think of when I think of joy is happiness. But what we find in the Bible is joy is not happiness. It's different. From a biblical perspective, this is what joy is. Joy is the soul's response to God's grace, resulting in the consistent rejoicing of praise, glory, and honor of who Jesus is. I want you to sit and rest on that definition for a second. Experiencing joy inwardly and expressing it outwardly consistently. Joy is the soul's response to God's grace, resulting in consistent praise, glory, and honor of who Jesus is. See, there's a big difference between joy and happiness. You can experience happiness but not really have joy. You can experience happiness when you get that new puppy. And then that joy will suddenly go away when that new puppy leaves a little gift on the floor for you. You can experience joy when you get the new car, and then the hail comes and beats up your new car. You can experience happiness when you have this moment. Sorry, I meant happiness in the first one, in that one. You can experience happiness maybe in a new relationship, until that person does something that you're not so happy about. What's crazy is in every single one of those scenarios, you can still have joy and not feel happy. You can experience real joy because joy starts vertically and it's expressed horizontally. Stephen told me this. He was thinking about, actually somebody was thinking about a message from last Sunday and I couldn't even remember it. And he said, hey, I was thinking about your message last Sunday. I was like, hey, cool. And he goes, hey, I was thinking as I was driving, like, the joy thing is vertical, right? But it's not horizontal. But then I started thinking about, well, when that joy is vertical, then it should be expressed horizontally, and isn't that a cross? I was like, oh, that's cool. That's what the cross is. The cross was not a joyful moment in most of our minds, but yet, oh my goodness, it is full of joy, because what do we get to experience on this side of the cross? And why wouldn't that want to be expressed to the people around us? God promises us joy, not happiness. Happiness is based on our circumstances. Happiness is self-centered. I was thinking about this. We've got a couple of different things going on, and so I was thinking about this idea of griping and complaining, right? People that gripe and complain are rarely happy. Have you noticed that? They rarely have any happiness. And so sometimes when we see somebody that's not happy, we don't think they have a whole lot of joy. See, if someone is griping and complaining, it's usually because they are sinfully pursuing happiness apart from Jesus. Think about the last time somebody griped about something or complained to you about something. Were they focused on Jesus, or were they focused on something else that was not Jesus? Most griping and complaining, like pursuing happiness, is focused on selfish preference, desires. And actually, the Bible considers griping and complaining as sinful. Lori's been dealing with a couple different ladies in our lives that don't live here. And one of them, a few years ago, she lost her husband. And then a couple weeks ago, her house burned down. She's got some things to complain about. But she needs a shoulder to cry on, a shoulder to talk to, somebody who can listen. So Lori's been leaning in and listening and praying with her and encouraging her. She's got another person that's been calling her and talking. This person has pretty much a pretty good life. She's got family close by. She's got a house overhead. She's got a pretty good job. But she calls and complains about how she's not the center of attention. How the way she wants things isn't working out the way she wanted things to work out. See, one of those individuals is crying out from their heart. The other one is crying out from selfish motive. One is just saying, I'm hurting. The other one is saying, I'm not getting what I want. One is a heart that's pursuing joy and looking for joy and wanting God to show up in ways that they can't even express. And the other is living in sin. See, happiness is self-centered. Happiness is feeling focused. And it's not bad to be happy. In fact, it's a good thing when we feel happy. We should feel happy. We should experience that. Happiness is a natural reaction to succeeding in something, to accomplishing something. The feeling of being appreciated, to be loved, to be favored, those are all good things. But biblical joy is different. Biblical joy is Jesus' kingdom focused. It sees, in spite of the circumstances, it sees the benefit of the circumstances or the situation that they are going through. It doesn't see themselves as a victim. It sees themselves as somebody who is reaching out to the hand of Jesus and he is pulling them out of the water. And they're looking back and they're seeing that they just got to walk on water with Jesus. And they haven't forgot that. Biblical joy is recognizing and resting on God's grace through what Jesus did. Biblical joy is focused on others and it's gospel focused. It's not being okay with just kind of keeping everything to myself, but there's a desire to share the gospel. Joy radiates through some of the most difficult moments, and it ripples into the lives of people that person who's experiencing and expressing that joy shares. If you've ever been around somebody who expresses the joy of Jesus, you can't help but be around them. You just want to be around them. You feel rejuvenated. You feel excited. If you've ever been around somebody who's negative and complaining, you just want to get away. Or you walk away feeling like you need to be complaining. You see, joy is the opposite of what the world shows us. There's a lady by the name of Maria. She'd been battling cancer for quite a while. And it's been about 5 years. And by this time, the doctors had kind of said, hey, there's not much more we can do. She's 37 years old. She's a single mom. She loves her church. And everything in her life, everything that she had been going through, everything that she had dealt with, single mom, now cancer, now there's no hope. She has every reason to complain. She had every reason to feel despair and depressed. But something unexpected happened with Maria. In her final months, Maria started doing something. She, when she was at the hospital, and she was at the hospital a lot, and she ended up being there for the last few years, or for the last few weeks and months, a lot more as she got closer and closer to passing away. She started doing these prayer meetings. She would just pray with the nurses that came in and pray with the doctors, and then she would go and try to connect with other people in the hospital if they were there for one reason or another, and she'd pray with them. She'd go down to the NICU and pray with the moms. She'd just pray with them. She started just praying. And what the nurses noticed is that if at the end of their day, if they would just walk into her room, they didn't need detox time. They didn't need me time. They just needed Maria time. Because they would just sit and just listen to Maria and talk with Maria and ask her some questions as they were off duty, and they would go home, and something changed in their homes. They weren't bringing all the struggles of work home with them. People would come to visit her, coming in to try to uplift her spirits, and they would walk away like, I needed to be here. Because Maria just seemed to love, seemed to have a peace, seemed to have a joy that had a ripple effect on everyone around her. And finally, one of her friends showed up, and she goes, her friend looked at Maria and goes, okay, Maria, I mean, your life, this is not good. How are you okay? And Maria just smiled. She's laying there in her bed. She can't do a whole lot. And she looked over and she said, you see that chair over there? And it's an empty chair. She goes, every morning when I wake up, no one's here. I look at that chair. Every time the doctors or nurses leave and it's just me, I look at that chair. Every night before I go to bed, before I fall asleep, in fact, as some of the drugs start kicking in to knock me out, I just look at the chair. And I imagine Jesus sitting there, and he's with me. He's with me through this. And he's not going to heal me, but I have a peace. I have a joy. And what they started to notice is that as her body got weaker, her faith got stronger, and she had a deeper impact on the people around her. And on the day she passed, people weren't happy, but they had joy. Because they knew they had got to experience the joy that Maria had reclaimed that God had always wanted her to have. So let me finish with this. How do I know if I have joy? Jump over to Galatians real fast. These are going to be quick. Galatians chapter 5. I want to show you this as we wrap up this morning. I want to show you 3 tests of true joy. How do I know? How can you know if you really have joy? Here they are. That we're going to go through them very quickly. First of all, let's go down to verse 16. Sorry, I'm in the wrong spot. I'm in Ephesians. I was like, that's not the right one. Galatians 5. Here we go, verse 16. I say then, walk by the Spirit, and you will certainly not carry out the desires of the flesh. So Paul begins with this, walk in the Spirit. If you want to know you have joy, you're walking in the Spirit. Walking infers a progress to make your way from point A to point B. Walk means to abide in, to stay alongside, to be in step with, to conduct oneself with another. The idea that Paul's getting at is you will be walking with the Spirit. You will be in step with the Spirit. You will see how the Spirit is working in your life. You're going to notice it. And you're going to notice how close you are to Him. Second, he says you'll be led by the Spirit. Look at verse 18. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Earlier he says you're not under the flesh, right? He starts making this comparison between being flesh-led and Spirit-led. And he goes on to the next few verses after verse 18. He goes, if you want to know whether you're Spirit-led or flesh-led, look at what happens. Look at what you do. Look at verse 19. Now the works of the flesh are obvious. Sexual immorality, moral impurity, promiscuity, idolatry, sorcery, hatreds, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and anything similar. I have warned you about these things. Why? Why is he warning us? Because those aren't Spirit-led, those are flesh-led things. And flesh produces flesh-like stuff, sin stuff, evil stuff. But then he says, in the next verse, you walk with the Spirit, you're led by the Spirit, you produce spiritual fruit. You produce joy around you. You're Spirit-led. Look at verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The law is not against any of those things. Now those who belong to Jesus have crucified the flesh and its passions and desires, and if we live by the Spirit, we keep in step with the Spirit. You see, when the Holy Spirit's working in your life, you may not always be patient. but you'll learn. You may not always experience joy, but it begins internally and it starts to work itself out. You may not always experience peace, but when you start to walk with the Spirit, and the more you're led by the Spirit instead of your feelings and emotions, the more that you let the Spirit work with you and in you, you begin to produce fruit that it becomes obvious, and that fruit is something everyone around you gets to enjoy. It's really hard to rejoice in the Lord, to have joy and do it consistently when you're focused on the negative, when you're focused on the bad, when you're focused on the storms, when you're focused on the evil. He goes on in chapter 6 and he says this, that you will reap what you will sow. If you sow flesh type stuff, you're going to experience, you and your family, your kids, your spouse, your coworkers, other friends, they're going to experience the flesh. And they're not going to know what joy looks like. But when you let the Spirit sow in you, it changes everything. So it begins with what we're focused on. If it's a storm, if you're focused on the sin, if you're focused on the evil, if it's anything but Jesus, you're going to find yourself drowning, struggling, feeling defeated. But if you want to reclaim the joy that God has promised you, it changes with looking to Him. Next week, we're going to look at some very simple things that we can do, or places that we can go, or things that we can participate in that will help us reclaim the joy that God has given us. But this week, I want you to look back at Galatians chapter 5, and I want you to read it together as a family or as an individual. Get away and start thinking about the things that are flesh-focused and the things that are spirit-focused, and how can I start to make those be a part of my life, the spirit stuff more than the flesh stuff? How am I letting the flesh stuff enter my mind, enter my thoughts, enter my focus? How do I get the stuff that's more spiritual, that's peace and joy and love more in front of me?